And so let's talk about Michael Mayer and what he was able to bring to the table last year and how we want to see another step from Michael Mayer this year.
It's kind of, you talked about tight end and you think about all the great tight ends that have come through Notre Dame just in the last 12 years. Forget history when we start talking about Dave Casper and Mark Bavaro and Derek Brown and Herb Smith and Oscar McBride, all these great tight ends that played at Notre Dame just the last 12 years. Really starting with Kyle Rudolph, and you look at Kyle Rudolph and Tyler Eifert and then Troy Nicholas and then Ben Koyak, Alize Jones, Durham Smythe, Alize Mack, because I remember he was Alize Jones as a freshman.
I remember.
And then he was Alize Mack later. Cole Kmet. And so you just watch. And then, of course, Michael Mayer. And none of those guys we just mentioned came anywhere close to the production as a freshman that Michael Mayer had this past year.
Correct.
And not only was that impressive, but he did it at a position where it's not like they needed a freshman to come in and play. He had to earn that playing time, and he was just that good. And to watch him come in, and the thing that I liked about him as a freshman, Vince, and we'll kind of dive into the expectations for him here in the spring and in the next season, was there's a couple things you notice about him. Number one, physically, he looks like a veteran. He's not your typical freshman tight end that needs that year to develop. He's physically ready to play. The other thing I like about it is he showed a lot of mental maturity and toughness. You think about some of the things that he went through a couple times this year. A lesser player might have allowed that to really bother him. And I think of the Clemson game.
Yep.
First and the two huge mistakes he made in that game. You had a drop that would have gone for a touchdown, and then you had the false start that negated another touchdown. But it didn't affect him. It's not that it didn't bother him. I'm sure it bothered him, but it didn't affect him. It did. What can often happen with veterans, much less freshmen, is you make a couple big mistakes and then it compounds. You either A, you lose your confidence, or B, you want to make up for it so bad that you then press and you make another mistake.
Yep.
With Michael Mayer, it's like, it just he's kind of got this look on his face all the time of just like, yeah, okay, I'm good. I got this. And then he went out and just kept making some big plays in that game.
Right.
And that was an impressive part. And the other thing that stood out to me was, when you think Michael Mayer and you look at him, you think, throwback tight end, 6'5", 240, big, strong, muscular kid, strong, tough, all that stuff. But he is probably the best tight end they've had as a freshman. He's the best tight end that I can think of when it comes to after the catch. And I'm not talking about like the stuff Cole Kmet did. I think of that play against Georgia. It was like 9 dudes trying to bring him down. Remember that play?
I do.
He caught that ball. I think it was a crossing route. Might have been a play up the – I think it was a crossing route, and it was like 9 dudes jumped on his back, and they still couldn't bring him down. And that was against Georgia. Michael Mayer can do that, I'm sure. I mean, especially as he gets older. But I'm talking about making people miss.
Right. He leapt over a guy, I believe.
Yeah,
I mean, there was one where he like danced the sideline.
Like there was a play last night. I was breaking down the all 22 of the Clemson ACC title game, and one of the catches he made early in the game, he's running outside and he stops, and the guy kind of runs by him and he cuts back inside, and you're like, tight ends aren't supposed to be able to move like that.
Exactly.
But it's also about great balance. It's not just about foot quickness, but it's about great balance. But he has such an incredible feel for the game as well. And so he just was one of the most advanced freshmen I've ever seen at Notre Dame, regardless of position. Just mentally, physically, emotionally, just being able to handle everything that the team went through last year on and off the field, and a steadiness to him. There just was a level of steadiness to where it wasn't like he ever had that bad game where it's like, oh, yeah, he looked like a freshman. He had we talked about the couple freshman moments against Clemson, but then he bounced back and played well.
Yeah, he had a great second half.
So those are the things you look at, Vince, and you say, this is a kid that just has – you talk about that it factor. I mean, he's not the fastest tight end Notre Dame's had in recent – he wasn't even the fastest tight end on the team last year, and he's not the biggest tight end that Notre Dame's ever had. He's not the best athlete that Notre Dame's ever had at tight end. There's just something about this kid that makes him the best tight end that Notre Dame's ever had as a freshman in my lifetime, and it's not even really close from a production standpoint, from a big game standpoint. There's just never been a moment where you're like, yeah, the spotlight got too big for him at that time. He just again, week after week, Vince just stepped up and he did it in the opener. I mean, he just made a couple plays against Duke. You're like, oh, okay. Michael Mayer's already made his presence felt. This is going to be fun to watch.
So you've anointed him as the best freshman tight end in your lifetime. I would agree.
I mean, combining production plus.
Absolutely. No, I get it. Absolutely. But that begs the question, what's next? What's the next step for Michael Mayer? I mean, you don't want to see him plateau as a freshman,
Sure.
right? You want to see him continue to get better. So what's the next step as a sophomore?
I do think we have to ask the question of how much better can he get?
Sure.
Not that I'm saying he can't, but I think when you look at how advanced he was, you always have to wonder, like, how much more chiseled is he going to get? How much bigger is he going to get? Is he going to get in faster? Those kind of things. So I think those are valid questions to say, does he have the same sort of growth potential that we saw from Tyler Eifert? Who, again, the reason I say best freshman, well, Tyler Eifert didn't play as a freshman.
Right.
He redshirted. He was still kind of a growing wide receiver that continued to develop. Is Michael Mayer going to make those same kind of physical jumps? I don't know. So that's kind of what we need to see. I don't think he's going to necessarily get a whole lot bigger and stronger and those kind of things, but I think there's a lot of room for him to continue developing as a player, especially as a blocker. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that's where that weight room strength, that extra year of weight room strength should help him. Because I don't believe he was not an early enrollee last year, and it wouldn't have mattered if he was, because they were only on campus for a couple months.
Right.
But I think there's certainly another level of weight room strength that can be gained there, and there's a lot of technique work needed. The thing I liked about Michael as a blocker was it was never a question about effort or willingness to block.
Agreed.
He's more than willing to mix it up. He's a tough kid. It's just he was still a freshman in the weight room, right? Going against a lot of times veterans, and he was a guy that still needs to work on technique. And technique is it's like leverage, it's about footwork. If you come off and you smash a guy and you're face to face with him, but you're supposed to be on that upfield shoulder, he's going to beat you. I don't care how tough you are, I don't care how strong you are, he's going to beat you unless you hold him. So it's those would be the things when he would lose a guy. He would smash a guy and he'd have the right angle, but he'd stop his feet. And then that allows that guy to recover, a veteran to recover. So just like little technical things like that aren't hard to teach, Vince, but it takes some experience to put, make those things as part of your game. And I wasn't expecting any freshman to walk on campus and have that.
And that's the thing, as a senior in high school, going into your freshman year of college, he didn't have to be perfect in technique to dominate the kids that he was going up against in high school. He was just a physical specimen, right? I mean, so there is a learning curve there. And again, it's nothing against Michael Mayer. It's just a fact that some of those things just have to be worked out.
Let's not also forget that Michael Mayer for 3 years in a row in high school was a first-team All-State defensive player, once as a defensive end, twice as a linebacker. So this was a kid who was playing both ways.
Sure.
And that's always going to right, exactly. So those are the areas where I think that growth can continue to happen. And as he gets more mature as a player, you always see this with freshmen, no matter how advanced they are. There's little tricks he's going to learn. Like, hey, I struggle to get open with this route. So let me learn some tricks that allows me to kind of work against this. Hey, safeties tend to give me more problems because they can run with me. So now I need to maybe better utilize my size. Linebackers can muscle with me, but they can't run with me. So there's all those types of little nuances that he'll learn. And that's the intriguing part about him is he had 42 catches for 450 yards last year. And you're saying, well, he's got to get better. Well, I mean, that's pretty freaking good.
Yeah.
But so I think it's those little things, those nuances, the weight room strength, the technique things. I think he was advanced for a freshman as a route runner. But again, advanced for a freshman doesn't mean you're advanced for a senior. So that's another part of the technical game. If he doesn't get an ounce better, if he doesn't get a split second faster, a tenth of a second faster, a hundredth of a second faster than the 40, if his bench press doesn't improve 1 ounce, if he makes no physical gains whatsoever, but improves the technical part of his game, you're going to see a jump for Michael Mayer in year 2.
Yep.
And so the question that I have when I talk about getting better is more of what will the gap be between when he's let's be honest, a rookie in the NFL and when Cole Kmet was a senior and, or junior. And actually, no, Cole Kmet left early. Tyler Eifert, I think, would be a good example. Tyler Eifert, by the time he was a senior, was so much bigger and stronger and had developed physically. I don't know if Michael Mayer can make those same kind of physical jumps because the baseline was already so good.
Yeah.
But the technical jumps are what's going to determine how much better he can be from year 1 to year 3. And that's the thing Notre Dame fans have to kind of wrap their head around. Barring some kind of injury or setback, you're going to have him for 2 more years. So enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so I think the bar for him now, Vince, isn't, where does he stack up from a Notre Dame standpoint? The bar for me is, is he going to stack up in 2021 from a best tight end in the nation standpoint? Sure. Because I think already as a sophomore, with his talent, with his production, and with an offense that likes to use tight ends, he has an opportunity to go into 2021 and be contending for the best tight end in the country, especially since a lot of the best tight ends from this past season all are now in the NFL. Kyle Pitts is in the NFL. Hunter Long's in the NFL. Brevin Jordan's in the NFL now, or heading to the NFL draft.
Sure.
So he has an opportunity, in my opinion, to emerge as arguably the best tight end in the nation. I think that's the bar that I set for him as a sophomore, which is saying a lot because I'm usually someone who likes to say, hey, let's pump the brakes on putting the hype on this young player. But that's kind of where I feel. I mean, he was so much more advanced than even Kyle Hamilton was as a freshman.